My name is Joanna Hahn, and I'm with the Indiana State Museum, and I want to thank you and your teachers and your schools for allowing you to come and visit us. You're actually part of a larger group of about 2,000 fourth graders who come to Indianapolis today to celebrate Statehood Day. We're one of 4 locations. That includes the State House, the State Library, and the Indiana Historical Society that are celebrating with and along with us today. We'll have a 30-minute program to commemorate today's celebration. We're all here to say happy birthday to our state, which is now 199 years old. I can only imagine the pioneers who came here first in 1816 probably couldn't fathom what Indiana would be like 199 years later. But today is also our state's official kickoff for our bicentennial celebration, which means on this day, 1 year from now, we'll be celebrating the 200th birthday. So I hope that you enjoy your visit and your experience here at the Indiana State Museum, and I'm going to get things started now. To begin with, we have a recorded message from our Governor, Mike Pence, who would like to speak to you a little bit on today's momentous birthday for our state. So why don't we go ahead and get that started?
Hi, I'm Governor Mike Pence, and today, all across the state of Indiana, Hoosiers are marking Statehood Day, the day Indiana became a state. We like to call December 11th the birthday of Indiana, so I hope you'll all join me in celebrating on today our 199th birthday of becoming a state. Before this day in 1816, there were actually only 18 states in the Union, and Indiana became number 19. But I'm probably talking about facts that all you fourth graders already know about as you're learning about our state's rich history this year in school. Now, one of the biggest requirements necessary to become a state was to have a population of at least 60,000, and once that was achieved, President Madison signed an act in Congress to make Indiana a state, and that happened on December the 11th. Delegates were then elected to meet in court in Indiana to write our first state constitution, and that document, along with our updated constitution in 1851, created the legal framework for the state that we call home today. These documents now serve as the guide for how Indiana is governed. From the legislative to the judicial branches of our state government, our Constitution defines who writes the laws and ensures that they're being properly interpreted and enforced. The Constitution also created the executive branch and the job of governor of Indiana that I have the great privilege to serve. When I was elected governor, this document actually became what I like to call my job description, and you can read all about it in our Constitution. As we celebrate Indiana's 199th birthday today, I know that you're all aware of what that means for next year. We've got a lot of celebrating to do on the eve of our 200th birthday, and you're a part of that celebration kickoff today. The Bicentennial Commission and Bicentennial Committee have been planning many ways for us to celebrate all over the state throughout the next year, and you can find out all about them on the Bicentennial website at indiana2016.org. Now, maybe you can do something special in your hometown or in your county. For example, be on the lookout for the Bicentennial Torch, which will be traveling through every county in the state of Indiana next year. So we'll have fun today. We'll celebrate this birthday. We'll take time to remember those who through the past 200 years have made this such a wonderful state to live, to work, to raise a family. And then think for a moment how each one of you and your families and your school might carry the torch forward to contribute to Indiana's future. I'm Governor Mike Pence. Thanks for letting me join you on this 199th birthday of the greatest state in the greatest nation on earth.
All right. Well, our governor is just one of many members of our state government who work hard every day to serve citizens like you and your families across the state of Indiana. We have another one of those members of the state government, several who are going to also be speaking to you today to help commemorate our state's birthday. I'd like to next introduce to you our state's Attorney General, Greg Zeller.
Well, thank you all, and happy Statehood Day, this 199th birthday of our state. You know, like the governor was saying, we're preparing to celebrate our 200th birthday next year, and I think it's a great time you all are in the 4th grade, so you're learning a little about our state's history, the structure of our government, the way things work. But imagine what things were like in 1816. Now, there's no cell phone. In fact, they don't have a phone at all. They don't have electricity in the cabins. There's no Google. There's no any of the things that you all think of as part of your life. They were coming here in the forest, having to carve out their own lives. So think back about how it would be like when our founders came across the river. They were bold and they faced a lot of things that were unknown about this new area. They created homes by cutting down trees and building cabins. They had to protect their families and their friends, and they had to do this to protect themselves against all of the risks that were there. They established our system of government that we still live under. One of the things that was unique about Indiana, in 1816, when we started our new state, they banned slavery. So we were a free state. And that attracted a lot of people who wanted to be part of a free state. One of those families, and someone who was 7 years old in 1816, was Abraham Lincoln and his family. They came across the river from Kentucky to be in a free state and enjoy the free property rights of our new state. And the promise of something better. That's always been one of the things that people in Indiana recognize. So the people who started our state, they wanted to be free, they wanted to have protections, and they wanted to have the promise of freedom and the protections of our government. So I want you to think about that as you look forward to our 200th birthday. And within your lifetime, you need to really explore ways that we can, again, be bold and reach into the uncharted, unknowns, some of the risks and some of the fears that we all share. But as Hoosiers, that's what we call all the people in our state, we have a certain thing that never changes. Just because they were here 200 years ago without a cell phone, they were still Hoosiers. And some of the things that they started are part of the character of what makes us all Hoosiers. They stood proudly and firmly against the fears that they had to face. Those things in their time that were risks and fears that they all shared. So when you go back to school and you think about quitting and how hard things are, sometimes when you think about whether you're even going to go on with your homework or all the hard work you have to do, or maybe you're just bored and you wonder if you can continue to read the rest of it, think about some of the people who started our state that had their own hardships and their own fears and risks, but they stood up amidst all of their fears and sat down and made sure they got their work done. So you're part of that Hoosier spirit that stands up proudly against all the risks and the fears that all of us share. But they didn't stop just to think about their fears and their risks, but the people that founded our state learned that if they banded together, if they came together as a community, as they came together as a state, that we're much stronger if we work together than if we're all by ourselves in the remote wilderness and the forests that they started years ago. So this idea of working together, protecting one another, and helping each other stand up like proud Hoosiers to face all of the challenges, but also the opportunities. So I'll leave you with one thing. As a Hoosier, you stand proudly and firmly and protect one another and share in our common heritage. But you also ask what you can do to make our state better in the future. Just like those people who started our state, that got us started and built something that we all now enjoy. It's your responsibility in your lives to build on what they've started and what we each day show up and do the hard work so that you can leave a better state for those who follow us. So that's your chore as you celebrate our state's 199th birthday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you all have homework now. You didn't give a due date, so yeah, so maybe by the next 200th birthday. Okay, to move on with our program, we have another member of our state government. We have a representation from the judicial side, those who serve to help interpret the laws and the Constitution of our state. So I'd like to now introduce to you the Honorable Brent Dixon.
Hi, everybody. Let's turn back the clock of history 199 years like Attorney General Zeller did a little bit. Back then, Indiana was a place of pioneer settlers. And in about 5 years before statehood, the people here in Indiana asked the United States Congress to let them become a state. And so in 1816, in April, Congress passed a law authorizing the Indiana citizens to take some steps to become a state. And one of those steps was to pass a constitution. So in June of that year, 43 delegates, people from throughout the state, met in Corydon, Indiana, which is our first state capital, as you know from your learning about Indiana history. And they began working to write a constitution. And by June, later on that same month, they passed it and sent it to Congress in the federal capital to be voted upon. And on December 11th, this day, in 1816, 199 years ago, President James Madison approved Indiana's admission to the United States as the 19th state. I want to talk to you for a moment about Indiana's first Constitution. Some of the main features were to protect the Hoosier citizens' liberties, especially their right to religious freedom, the right to jury trial and open courts, protection from seizure, unreasonable seizure and excessive punishments, protecting their freedom to contract with each other, to own property. The Constitution also required the government to provide lands for schools and education and to create a system of education. And interestingly, it had something the federal system did not have, and that was a strict rule requiring 3 branches of government that were separate from each other, and one could control the other. That Constitution in 1816 even required the citizens every 12 years to decide whether to have another convention to start a new constitution. And there was, as Attorney General Zeller pointed, an absolute prohibition on slavery in our state, and one that could never be altered by constitutional change. Well, that 1816 Constitution lasted for about 30 years, until 1850 and 51, when the people of Indiana held a new constitutional convention and adopted the Constitution we have today. And in many ways, our new Constitution had most of the provisions in the first Constitution of 1816, providing the same protections to the citizens that first Constitution did. Well, at the time, as you may know from your own studies, that Indiana passed its constitutions in 1816 and 1815, the federal government's constitution that we all know about really had no power in the state of Indiana, because that federal constitution only limited the federal government, and it had no control or limitation power over the state government. So when our settlers in Indiana and our pioneers in Indiana adopted a constitution in 1816 and amended it in 1851, they were writing the laws that were the only laws that were providing for their own protection. Now, this changed after the Civil War, when the 14th Amendment to the federal Constitution was passed. But up until that time, the state constitution was the only limitation on government power, the only way to assure the protection of people's liberty in our state. I want to stop for a moment and think with you about what a constitution is all about. We've heard the word, you've studied it in 4th grade. You know, Indiana's people had come here as pioneers. Attorney General Zeller's ancestors may have come across the Ohio River to get here. My ancestors came across the land from Ohio and came here. But however we got here, our people were all pioneer settlers at the time. And they were enormously independent and self-sufficient. They provided for their own needs. They were not reliant upon any outside organization like a government, except maybe to help protect them from Indian raids and things like that. But these pioneers, like their East Coast people in the 13 colonies, knew that by giving up some of their personal liberties to create a government, it would be better for everyone. If the government had limited powers so it wouldn't become like a king, like the King of England had been. And so the idea of the Constitution, very unique to the United States, was developed. The Constitution is an agreement. It's like a contract that people have with government saying, we will let you have some of our freedoms and govern us, but only in limited ways that this Constitution allows you. The power is still in the people. It's not in the government. And so that idea of government by contract remains with us today. We're free and we have individual liberties, not because government gives it to them, but because we have them as part of who we are. That 1816 Constitution says it, that we have individual freedom and liberty because they are our individual natural rights given to us by God, and we then we're allowed to create a government if we want, and we want. But we do it by Constitution. So this contract, our Constitution, limits the power of government to take our freedoms away from us. And the Constitution gives government limited power so that we can, by elections, direct what the government does, or we can have an amendment to a Constitution and change what the rules are. So, even though our Constitution of 1816 was later replaced in 1851, its principles remain. And the principles of how a constitution, a contract from people to their government, they are still with us. And the basic principles are clear. All power comes from the people. And only those powers that the people want to give government does government have. Individual liberties of people cannot be violated by government, and government is divided into 3 separate branches that each balance each other out, so no one becomes too powerful, and the people are always free to change their government. These are huge basic principles of the way we work in Indiana, and fortunately the way most of the states in the United States work as well. Good reason it is to celebrate today, December 11th, as a pretty special day. Happy birthday, Indiana. Thanks for letting me talk with you.
Well, we do have a very special guest with us today. She came all the way from Elberfeld, Indiana, in Warwick County. And in case you're not familiar where that's located, that's basically as about far south in Indiana as you go before you hit the Ohio River. I'd like to introduce 4th grader Delaney Potts, who's the 3rd place essay winner in a state-wide essay contest put on by the state libraries. Maybe your school participated in it. And I'm going to have Delaney read her winning essay.
Next year will be the 200th celebration of our state. To celebrate, my goal is to learn about and visit the 12 wonderful Indiana destinations from the Indiana website. I choose to go to these places because I want to learn more about Indiana. I will learn about each place and earn stamps online. Then, my family and I will visit the awesome sites around Indiana. One destination is the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore. Next are the Fort Wayne Science Central and Conner Prairie. In Indianapolis, I went to visit the Indiana State Library, Idle Jorg Museum, Children's Museum of Indianapolis, Indiana State Museum, and Indianapolis Zoo. In southern Indiana, I hope to see the Piper Flight Museum, Hoosier National Forest, Marengo Cave Site, and Lincoln Boyhood National Memorial Site. Of all the places I mentioned, I have already been to Fort Wayne Science Central, Conner Prairie, and Lincoln Boyhood National Memorial Site. At Fort Wayne Science Central, I learned about rocks and fossils. At Conner Prairie, I learned about the Civil War, Lenape Indians, and how to dip candles like they did in the 1800s. I got to see where Abe Lincoln's cabin was and what it would have been like. I can't wait to explore more sites.
Delaney, stay up. That was a very good job. So now you can take the Indiana State Museum off your list too, because you were here today. To say thank you for your hard work on your essay, the State Treasurer's Office is giving Delaney a College Choice 529 savings plan and a gift of $100 that she can use towards that college savings. So I'm going to give that to you now. So thank you very much. Another round of applause for Delaney. Okay, did everybody get their foam Indiana torches? Fantastic, I love it. So I just want to give a shout out to the State Office of Tourism who provided that today for you. If you notice, it says not just Indiana Bicentennial, but the torch relay. Today is the kickoff, not just for the Bicentennial, but for their torch relay. So you may keep an eye out in your community for the torch coming through with runners literally running with a torch like they do for the Olympics. So why don't we have everybody stand up and hold your torches up high. We are going to sing happy birthday to the state of Indiana on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday.